If you're a fan of true crime, then you need to hear this. Dear viewers, this week we're going on a journey into the depths of a dark world, to the mysterious and surprising stories of history's most dangerous criminals. These names are etched in our memories, not just for the crimes they committed, but also for the fear and tension they created. So, what made them so dangerous? What dark paths did they walk down, and how did they become so ruthless? And most importantly, did justice finally catch up to them? Get ready, because the stories I'm about to share with you will make your hair stand on end, and might even keep you up at night. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Charles Manson. Even his name sends chills down your spine, right? This name represents not just one man but an era, a reign of terror. From the outside, he might have seemed like an average guy. Some might have even found him charismatic. But his outward appearance couldn't hide the darkness within. But he was one of history's most terrifying cult leaders. His ability to manipulate people, his charisma, these were just some of the things that made him so dangerous. In 1969, Manson and his group, which he called his family, committed a series of horrific murders. These murders shook not only the victims but the entire community to its core. His targets were famous people in Hollywood. This was part of Manson's desire for attention and to spread fear. Roman Polanski's pregnant wife, Sharon Tate, and their guests were among the victims of this brutality. This tragedy showed that even under the bright lights of Hollywood, no one was safe. So, what turned Manson into such a ruthless killer? His dark past and the trauma he experienced played a big role in this transformation. His childhood was filled with poverty and abuse. These difficult circumstances shaped his character and his future actions. He got into trouble with the law at a young age and spent years in and out of jail. During this time, he became more involved in the criminal world. It was during this dark period that Manson developed his twisted philosophy and gathered a group of fanatics around him. This group became a killing machine, acting on his orders. Manson and his family were sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murders they committed. This conviction allowed society to breathe a sigh of relief. Manson applied for parole many times, but he was denied every time. He was seen as too much of a threat to society to be released. He died in prison in 2017 at the age of 83, but his death couldn't erase the trauma caused by his crimes. The horror and pain he left behind are still fresh in our memories. Manson's story reveals the dark side of human nature and the power of manipulation. Now, let's travel to the green valleys of Colombia and talk about Pablo Escobar. He's one of the most famous and feared people to ever come from this land. He was once the head of the world's biggest drug cartel. He was known as the Cocaine King. His name became a symbol of both fear and wealth. Escobar came from a poor family. He learned about life's hardships at a young age. He entered the world of crime when he was just a kid. He learned to commit crimes to survive. First he stole gravestones, then he started stealing cars. These small crimes were the beginning of a long career in crime. But the path that led him to wealth and power was drug trafficking. The cocaine trade made him rich quickly. He quickly built a drug empire that stretched from Colombia to the United States. This empire gave him unbelievable power and wealth. He had billions of dollars. He had so much money he couldn't find places to hide it all. He was so powerful he could buy politicians, police, even entire countries. Bribery and fear were his greatest weapons. But Escobar's reign couldn't last forever. Like all empires, his eventually came to an end. The governments of Colombia and the US joined forces to capture Escobar. This cooperation led to his downfall. After years of bloody fighting, he was killed by police in 1993. This was the end of his story. With Escobar's death, his drug empire crumbled. Colombia tried to recover after this huge disaster, but the destruction and pain he left behind are still an open wound for Colombia. His legacy left deep scars on the country's history. Next up, we have a killer whose looks deceived everyone. Ted Bundy. He was handsome, educated, and charming. No one would have guessed he was a monster. Bundy was a serial killer who terrorized America in the 1970s. He kidnapped young women, tortured them, and then brutally murdered them. The exact number of his victims is unknown, but estimates suggest it's over 30. The most terrifying thing about Bundy was how he charmed his victims and gained their trust. He often pretended to be injured or used a fake identity. After incapacitating his victims, he would show his true face. Bundy, sought after by police for years, was finally caught and put on trial. He was sentenced to death and executed in the electric chair in 1989. He denied his crimes and showed no remorse until his death. One of the most powerful figures in Mexico's drug world, El Chapo. El Chapo, whose real name is Joaquin Guzman, was the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. He made billions of dollars from drug trafficking. El Chapo was known for his intelligence and ruthlessness. He was also an escape artist. He managed to escape twice from even the most secure prisons in Mexico. In his first escape, he hid in a laundry cart, and in his second escape, he entered a tunnel from his cell. El Chapo's escapes made the Mexican government and security forces look foolish. After a years-long manhunt, he was captured again in 2016 and extradited to the U.S. He is currently being held in one of the most secure prisons in the U.S. He lives under very tight security measures to prevent any chance of escape. But El Chapo's legend lives on. And now, let's travel back to 1920s America, the era of prohibition and gangsters. During this time, America's streets were filled with illegal alcohol and organized crime. People drank in secret bars, and gangsters fought for power in the city's dark corners. Al Capone, also known as Scarface, was the ruthless leader of the Chicago outfit. His name inspired fear and respect in the criminal underworld. Capone was born into a poor Italian immigrant family. His family came to America hoping for a better life. He entered the world of crime at a young age. He started with small-time crimes but quickly got involved in bigger things. During Prohibition, he made a lot of money from smuggling alcohol, gambling, and other illegal activities. This illegal business made him very rich and powerful. He became famous for bloody fights with rival gangs. These fights turned the streets into a bloodbath. One of the most famous incidents was the massacre of rival gang members on Valentine's Day in 1929. This event showed his ruthlessness to the whole world. Capone managed to escape the law for a long time. Police and detectives worked hard to catch him. His connections with police and politicians kept him out of jail. He protected himself with bribes and threats, but in the end, he was caught for tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in prison. This was the end of his criminal career. His years in prison wore Capone down. His health deteriorated quickly, and he lost his former power. His health declined, and he died in 1947 at the age of 48. This was his tragic end. Even after his death, he remained a symbol of the glamorous and dark world of gangsters. Al Capone is remembered as one of the most famous gangsters in American history. Well, dear viewers, those are the stories of 5 of history's most dangerous criminals. They were all different, but they all had one thing in common. They had taken a dark path, and that path led them to a point of no return. There are many lessons to be learned from these stories. The consequences of crime, violence, and greed are always severe. I hope that while watching this video, you too have been reminded of this fact. See you next week on another episode of Mysterious and Amazing Stories. Goodbye.